Hi guys, Vicky here. The presentation that I decided to do was about intermittent fasting. I just want to apologize just in case maybe my accent might be a little bit strong, and I'm gonna try to talk as slow as I can, just because I've been in Argentina for so long. I know that I haven't been speaking in English much. So here we go. What if I told you that breakfast is not the most important meal of the day anymore? A lot of recent studies have been talking about intermittent fasting, which is a very popular new way of dieting in the global world. And there is very different ways of doing it, so I'm gonna be touching base on a few different types, and then we're gonna go from there. So what is intermittent fasting? Intermittent fasting is periods of voluntary abstinence of food and drink, which means there's a few ways of doing it. But they say that back in the day, in the prehistoric ways, human beings would not have availability to food 24 hours like we do these days. They couldn't just go to the supermarket and get food. So um, on those periods of time where they couldn't find any food, those would be their fasting periods, and then there would be periods of food of time where they would like hunt something huge, and then they had a lot of food, so they would like be feasting on those days and then fasting on the next few days. Um, there's a few ways of doing intermittent fasting, so I'm gonna point out those different ways and then go from there. So there is three different types of fasting that I'm going to be talking about, and then three other types that are more religious, and I'm not going to be talking about those very much because I read about them, but they were more interesting for me, the different other ones. So complete alternate day fasting means that on one day you don't eat any calories whatsoever. You eat zero calories, so you're allowed to just drink water, coffee, or tea with no calories in it. And then on the other day, you are allowed to eat whatever you want and as much as you want. The modified fasting regimens are when they allow on the fasting days to eat 20 to 25% of calories, which means that on a normal 2,000 calorie diet, you'll be eating only 45,000 calories a day. Sorry, 4 to 500 calories a day. And then on the other days, you can eat whatever you want. And this one's very typical to do like a 5 day to 2 day, 5 day feasting day, and then 2 days of fasting days. Um, a lot of people do them 2 consecutive days. A lot of other people do like start with a feasting day, and then the next day you would be fasting, and then feasting, and then fasting again. They say that it's more successful if you start with a feasting day because people don't feel like they're dieting very much. And then the tempted restricted feeding way is when you are allowed to eat on an 8 hour window, which means that you would be eating, for example, from 11 in the morning till 7 at night, and then you would fast or not eat anything with calories after on that other 16-hour window. Fasting means a period of time where we're not eating. They say that the human body needs a fasting period. Usually, our fasting period is when we go to bed. A lot of people eat very late at night, and they say that there is like health risks to be binge eating at night because our body doesn't have that time to um, uh, digest, absorb, regenerate cells, um, and all those processes that we do when we are sleeping, which is also when we're fasting. Sorry about that. The other three are religious ones. There's a lot of studies about Ramadan fasting, which is like a 12-hour period where there's a month of Ramadan where in the Islam people don't eat for 12 hours and then feast on 12 hours. And a lot of case studies have shown that a lot of these subjects lose weight on that month, usually between 5 and 6% of their body weight. So there's pros and cons on it. Pros, most approaches show that there is a lot of weight loss on these type of um, intermittent fasting regimens. There's also evidence that it can reduce or help reduce the risk of type 2 diabetes or reverse it eventually. Um, a lot of data shows that it is easier to follow than a normal calorie restriction diet. And it is said to improve a lot of other things like um, mental clarity. It is shown to prove a lowering in blood pressure. And then there's a lot of info that says that it would like reduce your cancer risk or Alzheimer's. But that has more to do with like the fasting state where our bodies doesn't use glucose to metabolize and use energy anymore. So after a fasting period, our body runs out of glucose, which means that our body's going to start using fat instead of glucose in blood. And when it's said that when we use fat as a energy source, then we achieve that mental clarity and all these risks on cancer and Alzheimer's are said to be reduced because of that. Also, it is said that it increases our growth hormone or human growth hormone, which helps cell regeneration and cell reproduction, and it lowers insulin levels. For cons, it says that if you are like a type 1 diabetic, it's very hard to follow. It also may increase your stress hormone cortisol, which means that you want to eat more and you want to have more cravings. On normal weight adults, it is unlikely to show substantial improvements, and there is some cases that show binge eating on some subjects, which means that they gained weight after doing it. Also, there's reports of extreme hunger on some of the intermittent fasting regimens, which means that it's not a feasible public health intervention. So, continuing, we're going to talk a little bit about the health benefits. Anti-aging was one of the ones that I read most about because it touched close to me. The mom of one of my clients with autism wanted to do this for one of my clients because it says it's anti-aging. So I've been reading a lot about it and there's no very clear cases on it. One of the evidence-based studies that I found talks about reducing the circulating IGF-1 levels when we're fasting. Basically, when IGF-1 levels are reduced, so is long-term aging. So one of the studies showed that actually IGF levels are reduced when you're intermittent fasting, which means that long-term aging could be reduced. But there's not long enough evidence or tests done that show this in the long run, so it couldn't be proved. And also, they talk a lot about autophagy, and I'm going to be talking a little bit more about autophagy in the next slide, but cellular and molecular mechanisms by which intermittent fasting improves health and counteracts disease. It's involving like an adaptive cellular stress response where it signals pathways to enhance mitochondrial health and DNA repair. And autophagy. So autophagy means that our cells basically delete from our bodies everything that is not working well, and we eat them up and we eliminate them from our bodies and we regenerate them to create all the good cells that work well. Basically what this is doing is enhancing our mitochondrial health, and it's also preventing disease. So during fed state, which is when we're eating, our insulin levels are increased, which means that our autophagy levels are low. But when we're fasting, insulin level drops, so autophagy increases, which means that intermittent fasting promotes autophagy, which means that on the long run, we are actually fighting more for disease and regenerating our good cells. Also, guys, what happens is that when we're fasting, we're putting our body on a little bit of a stress mode. So putting our body on the stress mode is what's going to make all these cells start working again. It's very interesting to me because my dad worked with chickens for a very long time, and he actually put the chickens on a fasting state so that they would like it was like an anti-aging way. So you put them on a fasting state so that they produce more eggs when they're getting a little bit older. They stop producing so much, so then you put them on a fasting state, which is horrible to me to think about it, but it is a way of making their bodies feel they're younger and they can keep on producing eggs, which is kind of blows my mind that all the bodies do that. So they say that the anti-aging effects of the calorie restriction and the intermittent fasting of putting our bodies in a little bit of stress is going to increase the autophagy, which is going to help us on fighting disease and preventing them and to regenerate the good cells. So how do we achieve this? By low carb diets and intermittent fasting and regular exercise. So then I'm going to talk a little bit about type 2 diabetes. I can't talk too much about it because it cannot be proven too much that it's the actual intermittent fasting what's doing it. So I wrote a lot about case studies here. Everything that you can read is about a case study done. Basically, what I've been reading is that it cannot be shown that it's the intermittent fasting what is reducing the risk of type 2 diabetes, but actually the calorie restriction and the weight loss that the intermittent fasting is generating is what is helping with the reduction of risk for type 2 diabetes, or actually reversing it. It was very hard to show that it's exact like actually the intermittent fasting what's doing it. um, because there is weight loss with intermittent fasting. Weight loss have been proven that will reduce the risk. So a lot of studies say that they don't have enough evidence to say that it's the intermittent fasting. But they say that because it is easier to follow than a calorie restriction diet, then a lot of subjects that have been exposed to this type of dieting have shown positive results. So here's a little bit more info about it, and here's what I was saying about the weight loss proving that it's doing it more than anything else. I'm gonna leave this about gut microbiota for you guys to read it later because I don't have enough time on these slides. But basically, what it says that fasting regimens appear to have a positive impact on our gut. Just because how we put our bodies on stress and the type of diet that we follow. Um, it says that the gut microbiota in obese individuals may enable an obese microbiota to harvest more energy from the diet than from the lean microbiota, thereby influencing net energy absorption, expenditure, and storage, which is making it better. In conclusion, guys, what I've been reading is that it is hard to say that intermittent fasting is doing all the benefits. Um, More than anything, they are saying that because there's a lot of data on the calorie restriction side, most of the health benefits come from the calorie restriction diets. And it's been shown in a lot of studies that having a caloric restrictive diet, putting our bodies on a little bit of stress, is good in the long run. And it's going to prevent a lot of the diseases. When you can show that in obese or overweight people, if they lose a little bit of weight, their blood pressure is going to go down, their insulin levels are going to go down, all that fat level is going to go down. Obviously, cardiovascular disease risk is going to go down. Your risk for diabetes is going to go down, which means that weight loss and fat levels drops are doing those things. Um, Unfortunately, there's not enough evidence to show that it's intermittent fasting what's doing it. But I do believe that because it is easier maybe for some people to follow it, it's that it can do all the benefits. Um, and so I think it would be good if you can do it and it is easier for you to follow this type of calorie restrictive diet and lose the weight if you're obese, then maybe it's a good way to do it for you. But you should still do it with a doctor so that there's no health risks involved in too much calorie restriction maybe, or stuff like that. Um, at the end here, guys, I posted a TED talk on intermittent fasting. This lady, Cynthia Thurlow, has like a very big website where you can like sign up and she goes with you. She's a nurse and she's a nutritionist and she follows up with you on intermittent fasting techniques. And it's a 12-minute talk, so I'm not gonna put it right here. But if you click on it, you guys can go straight to the link and you guys can see this talk. So I'm gonna leave it here for you guys. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'm here for questions and answers. Thank you.